The meeting hall of the Galactic Council was filled with beings from across the stars. The great chamber had tall walls made of crystal that showed the light of distant galaxies. Representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in their seats waiting for the session to begin. Today was special. Today, humanity would leave the council. Council Speaker Vexnara stood at the center platform. Her blue skin glowed softly under the lights. She was a delphinium, one of the oldest and wisest species in the galaxy. Her kind had been traveling between stars for 10,000 years. Today she felt relief. After 200 years, the humans were finally going home. The humans had always been different. They were loud where others were quiet. They were quick to act when others wanted to think. They asked too many questions. They went to places others feared. Some called them brave. Others called them reckless. Most just found them exhausting. When humans first joined the council, everyone was curious. These newcomers had discovered faster than light travel only 50 years before. That was nothing compared to the thousands of years other species had been exploring space. But the humans were eager. They wanted to learn everything. They wanted to help with everything. They wanted to be part of everything. At first, it was charming. The humans brought new ideas and fresh energy. But soon problems appeared. Humans volunteered for dangerous missions that other species avoided. They built outposts in strange places. They studied things that did not need studying. They made weapons when everyone else made peace. The council members began to whisper. Why did humans always prepare for war? Why could they not simply enjoy the peace that the galaxy had known for thousands of years? Vexnara tapped her speaking crystal. The sound rang through the hall, bringing silence. All eyes turned to the human section. Ambassador Chen stood up slowly. He was an older human with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served humanity in the council for 30 years. Today would be his last day. Chen walked to the center platform. He carried a small data tablet. His steps echoed in the quiet hall. When he reached the speaking position, he looked around at all the different species. Some looked happy to see him go. Others looked confused. A few looked sad. Chen smiled softly. He spoke in the common galactic language. His voice was calm and clear. He thanked the council for 200 years of cooperation. He thanked them for sharing knowledge and resources. He spoke of all the things humans had learned from the older species. He was polite and professional. Then he came to the important part. Humanity was withdrawing from galactic affairs. All human colonies outside the Sol system would be closed. All human stations would be abandoned or destroyed. All human ships would return home. Within 6 months, there would be no human presence anywhere beyond the boundaries of their home system. Chen said it was because of philosophical differences. He did not explain what that meant. The council did not ask. The vote was quick. All members agreed to accept humanity's resignation. There were no speeches against it. No one asked the humans to stay. The relief in the room was clear. After Chen transmitted the final documents, he bowed to the council and walked out. The human section emptied as all human representatives left the chamber. They did not look back. Over the next weeks, the exodus began. Human colonies that had existed for generations started packing up. Families who had never seen Earth prepared for the long journey home. Space stations that had orbited distant worlds for decades went dark and silent. Human cargo ships moved in long lines back toward Sol system, carrying everything humans owned in space. The council watched with satisfaction. Some members visited human facilities as they were being abandoned. They were surprised by what they found. The human outposts were much bigger than anyone thought. Some had weapon systems that seemed too powerful for simple defense. Some had sensors that could detect things across entire star systems. When asked, the humans just said these were standard safety measures. The council members shrugged. Humans were always paranoid. At one abandoned human station near the outer rim, a Xylothian inspector found something strange. In the database, there were mission reports about patrols in deep space. Why would humans patrol empty space? When he asked a human technician who was dismantling equipment, the technician just smiled. He said humans like to explore. The inspector did not think more about it. As the last human ships departed from the border regions, Captain Zelthor of the Xylothian Defense Fleet received new orders. His ships would now patrol the trade routes that humans had been watching. It seemed like an easy job. The galaxy had been at peace for thousands of years. How hard could it be? On the day the last human transport entered Sol system, there was a small celebration at the council. Vexnara made a speech about the beginning of a new era. She talked about how the galaxy would continue to thrive in peace and cooperation. Everyone agreed. The future looked bright. Far away in the depths of space beyond the known trade routes, something stirred. In the darkness between stars, sensors that had been maintained for 200 years began to fail. Warning beacons that had run continuously started to go offline. Defense systems that had never been seen went silent. All across the galaxy, invisible shields were disappearing. But no one noticed. No one except the things that had been kept away. Back on Earth, Ambassador Chen stood in his apartment and looked up at the night sky. He had a glass of whiskey in his hand. Someone asked him if he felt sad about leaving the council. Chen took a drink and was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something strange. He said the galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson. He said his only regret was that so many innocent people would suffer while they learned it. When asked what he meant, Chen just shook his head and walked away. 3 months passed since the humans left. At first, everything seemed fine. The council was happy. Trade continued normally. The member species went about their daily lives. But slowly, small problems began to appear. At first, no one connected them. They seemed like random issues that could happen anywhere. But they kept growing. Captain Zelthor sat in his command chair aboard the Defender of Stars. His fleet of 12 ships patrolled the outer rim trade routes. These routes connected dozens of colonies to the central worlds. Millions of beings depended on these routes for food, medicine, and supplies. The routes needed to be safe. That was his job now. The job the humans used to do. At first, the job was easy. His ships flew their patrol patterns. They scanned for problems. They found nothing. Space was quiet and peaceful, just as it had always been. Zelthor started to relax. Maybe the humans had been doing unnecessary work all along. Maybe their constant patrols were just paranoia. The galaxy was safe. There was nothing to worry about. Then the attacks began. The first one happened near a small mining colony. A transport ship carrying valuable minerals simply disappeared. One moment it was there on the sensors. The next moment, nothing. No distress call. No debris field, just gone. Zelthor sent ships to investigate. They found nothing. Not even a trace of the missing vessel. It was as if the ship had never existed. 2 days later, another ship vanished. Then another. Then 3 more. All of them disappeared along the same trade route. Zelthor increased patrols in the area. He stationed ships at every junction point. He had his sensors running at maximum range, but it did not help. Ships kept disappearing, and then his own ship started getting attacked. The first attack came without warning. One of his patrol vessels was conducting a routine scan when it detected something. The sensor officer called it a contact, but before they could identify what it was, the contact opened fire. The weapons were unlike anything in the Council database. They tore through shields like they were not there. They cut through hull armor like paper. The patrol vessel managed to send a distress call before it exploded. Zelthor listened to the recording. The screams of his crew haunted him. When he arrived with the rest of his fleet, the attackers were gone. All that remained was debris and bodies. His science officer analyzed the wreckage. The weapon signatures were strange. They used technology that seemed ancient, older than anything the Council had records of. When Zelthor asked if pirates could have weapons like this, his science officer just shook his head. These were not pirates. This was something else. Something worse. Zelthor sent emergency reports to the Council. He requested reinforcements. He requested better weapons. He requested information about what he was fighting. The Council responded slowly. They said they would look into it. They said more ships would be sent. They said there was no need to panic. But Zelthor could hear uncertainty in their messages. The Council had no idea what was happening. Meanwhile, other problems appeared across the galaxy. On the frontier colony of Delph Prime, settlers reported that the wildlife was becoming aggressive. Large predators that usually avoided populated areas now attacked settlements. Hunters were found dead in the forests. Children disappeared from playgrounds. The colonial governor requested help from the Delphinium homeworld. A team of xenobiologists arrived to study the problem. What they found confused them. The predator population had grown dramatically. These creatures bred slowly. They should not have increased this much. When the scientists checked old records, they made a discovery. The humans had been studying these animals. Human research teams had visited the colony regularly. They had been tracking predator populations and quietly removing dangerous individuals. They had been keeping the ecosystem balanced. Without them, nature was running wild. The lead scientist, Dr. Velman, requested the human research data. She thought it might help them understand how to fix the problem. But when she contacted the council for the files, she got a strange response. All human research was classified as restricted technology. Humans had encrypted everything before they left. No one could access it without human authorization. And humans were not answering messages from outside Sol system. Similar problems appeared on other colonies. Everywhere humans had worked, small disasters began. On Xyloth Minor, the solar flare early warning system went offline. The system had been built by humans decades ago. It had saved countless lives by predicting dangerous solar activity. Now it was dead. Engineers tried to fix it, but they could not understand the technology. They requested the technical specifications from Earth. The response was brief. Classified human technology. When the next solar flare hit Xyloth Minor, there was no warning. 3 orbital stations were destroyed. Thousands died. The Xylothian government protested to the council. They demanded that humans provide the information needed to rebuild the warning system. The council sent formal requests to Earth. Earth sent back a simple message. Our technology, our choice. The Xylothians were furious, but there was nothing they could do. Humans had the legal right to keep their technology secret. Back on the Outer Rim, Zelthor's situation grew worse. More ships arrived to help, but they were not prepared for what they faced. The attackers struck fast and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. They seemed to know exactly where the patrol ships would be. They hit supply convoys protected by military escorts. They destroyed communication relays. They were cutting off entire sectors from the rest of the galaxy. One of Zelthor's officers found something in the old human patrol reports. The reports mentioned contacts in deep space, unidentified vessels that appeared and disappeared. The humans had labeled them as potential threats. They had been tracking these contacts for decades. They had even fought several small battles that were never reported to the council. When Zelthor read these reports, he felt cold. The humans had known. They had known these things were out here, and they had been fighting them alone. He brought his findings to the council. He showed them the human reports. He explained that humans had been protecting these trade routes from unknown hostile forces for 200 years. The council members looked at the evidence with growing alarm. Why had the humans never told them? Why had they kept this secret? The answer came from an old recording. A human military officer explaining to his superiors, "We told them about threats. They said we were being paranoid. They said we saw danger where there was none. So we stopped telling them and just handled it ourselves." The council chamber fell silent as they listened to the recording. Vexnara felt something she had not felt in centuries. She felt afraid. She looked at the other council members and saw the same fear in their eyes. They had celebrated when the humans left. They had been relieved to be rid of the warlike, paranoid species. Now they were beginning to understand. The humans had not been paranoid. They had been right all along. Emergency messages were sent to other sectors. Reports came back from all across the galaxy. Everywhere humans had been present, protective systems were failing. Everywhere human patrols had operated, attacks were increasing. The galaxy was not falling apart yet, but cracks were showing, and those cracks were growing wider every day. The council called an emergency session. They needed to understand what was happening. They needed to understand what the humans had really been doing all these years. But most importantly, they needed to figure out how to survive without them. 6 months after humanity departed, the galaxy was in crisis. What had started as small problems had grown into an emergency. The Outer Rim was now a war zone. Entire sectors had gone dark. Colonies were cut off from supply lines. And still, the council did not know what they were fighting. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. On the research world of Kelvin III, a team of archaeologists was studying ancient ruins. They had been working on this site for years, carefully excavating structures that were millions of years old. The ruins belonged to a civilization that existed long before any current species had left their homeworlds. The archaeologists hoped to learn about this lost culture. What they found instead was terror. Deep in the ruins, they discovered a chamber that had been sealed. When they opened it, automatic defense systems activated, ancient weapons that still worked after millions of years, energy beams that cut through modern shields like they were nothing. Half the research team died in the first few seconds. The survivors ran for their lives. Behind them, the ancient facility came fully online, its weapons tracking anything that moved. The lead archaeologist, Professor Krendall, sent an emergency message to the council. He also sent something else. In the moments before they had opened the chamber, their sensors had detected something, a human device, a small machine that had been sitting outside the sealed door. The device was damaged now, destroyed when the ancient systems activated, but its purpose was clear. It had been a lock, a human-made lock that had kept the chamber sealed. The council sent investigators to examine the site. What they discovered shocked them. Records showed that humans had visited this site 20 years ago. A human research team had spent 3 months here. Their official report said they were studying ancient languages. But now it was obvious what they had really been doing. They had been making the site safe. They had identified the dangerous chamber and sealed it. They had left behind a security device to make sure it stayed sealed. And they had never told anyone. This discovery led to a galaxy-wide investigation. Council teams began examining every location where humans had conducted research. What they found was terrifying. Humans had been everywhere. On hundreds of worlds, human teams had quietly located ancient dangers and neutralized them. Sleeping war machines, ancient biological weapons, automated defense systems, doomsday devices left behind by extinct civilizations. Humans had found them all, and they had made them safe. Without ever asking for help. Without ever telling anyone what they were protecting them from. On the water world of Aquos, investigators found human-designed containment fields around deep ocean trenches. When they studied what was in those trenches, they found something that should not exist. Biological entities that fed on intelligent thought. Ancient weapons designed to destroy entire civilizations by driving them insane. The human containment fields had kept these things trapped and dormant. Now those fields were failing. Already, fishing vessels near the area were reporting crew members who went mad and attacked each other. In the asteroid fields of the Kresh Expanse, miners discovered human military installations that had been operating in secret for decades. These were not simple outposts. They were fortresses, armed with weapons that made Council military hardware look like toys. The miners explored the abandoned facilities and found battle damage. Evidence of fierce fighting. The humans had been fighting a war here. A war no one else knew about. That was when the Kresh swarm emerged. Historians recognized the name from ancient records. The Kresh had been a plague on the galaxy millions of years ago. A species of biological machines that consumed everything in their path. They reproduced by breaking down other life forms and using the raw materials to build more of themselves. Ancient civilizations had fought them in terrible wars. Eventually, the Kresh were believed destroyed. That belief was wrong. The Kresh had never been destroyed. They had been contained, pushed back into dark space beyond the known galaxy. And for 200 years, humans had been holding the line, fighting a secret war to keep the Kresh from returning. The human fortresses in the Kresh Expanse had been the front line of that war. Every day, human soldiers died fighting to protect a galaxy that did not even know it needed protecting. And they did it without complaint, without recognition, without help. Now the humans were gone. The fortresses stood empty. The defense lines were unmanned. And the Kresh swarm was advancing. They moved fast, faster than anyone expected. They hit the first Council worlds within days. Military forces that had never faced real combat were slaughtered. The Kresh were relentless. They were efficient. And they learned from every battle, adapting their tactics to counter whatever weapons were used against them. Council Military Command realized they had a bigger problem. They did not know how to fight. The Council military existed mostly for parades and ceremonial functions. They had training exercises but no real combat experience. No one alive in the Council military had ever been in a real battle. Why would they? The galaxy had been at peace for thousands of years. At least that was what everyone believed. In desperation, military commanders began studying human combat records. What they found was humbling. Human military doctrine was sophisticated beyond anything the Council had. Humans had strategies for fighting enemies that Council species did not even believe existed. They had weapons designed for threats no one else acknowledged. They had trained for scenarios that seemed like paranoid fantasy. Except those scenarios were real, and now they were happening. But reading about human tactics was not the same as implementing them. Council forces tried to copy human strategies, but they failed again and again. They lacked the training. They lacked the mindset. Humans approached war differently. They expected things to go wrong. They planned for their plans to fail. They had backups for their backups. Council species found this exhausting and inefficient. Now they understood. This was not inefficiency. This was survival. More discoveries came in every day, each one more disturbing than the last. In deep space, navigation beacons that humans had deployed were going offline. Without these beacons, faster-than-light travel became dangerous in those regions. Space-time itself seemed unstable in certain areas. Ships that jumped to FTL in these zones never arrived at their destinations. They were simply lost, torn apart by forces that normal sensors could not detect. Humans had mapped these danger zones and placed beacons to stabilize them. Now those beacons were dying, and the safe routes through space were disappearing. A Council science team managed to recover a human beacon before it failed completely. When they examined it, they were amazed by its complexity. The technology was centuries ahead of anything the Council had. The device was not just a navigation aid. It was actively manipulating space-time, smoothing out quantum fluctuations that would otherwise tear ships apart. How long had humans been using technology this advanced? And why had they never shared it? The answer came from a decoded human military message. The message was old, from 50 years ago. A human admiral writing to her superiors about the decision to keep certain technologies secret. She explained that humans had tried sharing advanced technology before. Other species had called it unnecessary. They said humans were overcomplicating simple problems. They rejected human solutions because they did not believe human warnings about dangers. Eventually, humans stopped offering. If the galaxy did not want human help, humans would not force it on them. Vexnara read that message 3 times. Each time she felt more sick. She remembered those discussions. She had been part of them. When humans had presented their advanced weapons, she had voted against accepting them. She thought humans were trying to militarize the peaceful council. When humans had warned about potential threats, she had dismissed their concerns as paranoia. She had been so certain that humans were the problem. Now she knew the truth. Humans had been the solution, and she had helped drive them away. An emergency meeting of the full council was called. Representatives from every member species gathered. The mood was grim. Reports came in from all sectors. The Kresh swarm was advancing. Ancient systems were awakening across the galaxy. Navigation routes were collapsing. Defensive networks were failing. Everything was happening at once. The galaxy was not slowly declining. It was rapidly falling apart, and the Council finally had to face the terrifying truth. For 200 years, humanity had been the galaxy's shield. They had fought every battle. They had faced every threat. They had solved every crisis. And they had done it all alone, without recognition, without thanks, without help. Now they were gone, and the galaxy had no idea how to survive without them. The truth came in pieces, like assembling a puzzle made of nightmares. Each new discovery made the picture worse. Council intelligence teams worked around the clock, breaking through human encryption, recovering data from abandoned facilities, interviewing anyone who had worked with humans. What they found revealed a reality that no one had imagined. A reality that had existed right alongside them for 200 years, invisible and terrifying. A breakthrough came when a Delphinium hacker managed to decrypt a human military database. The file was massive. Thousands of mission reports, battle logs, threat assessments, and strategic analyses. The hacker spent 3 days just organizing the data. When she finally presented it to the Council, she looked like she had not slept. Her hands shook as she uploaded the files. She said she wished she had never seen what was in them. The Council leadership gathered in a secure chamber to review the data. What they saw broke something inside them. The file listed 47 active extinction-level threats. Not potential threats. Not theoretical dangers. Active threats that were happening right now. Threats that had been happening for centuries. Threats that humanity had been fighting alone while everyone else enjoyed peace and prosperity. The Kresh swarm was just one entry on the list. 1 out of 47. There were ancient AI systems that had gone insane. and wanted to destroy all biological life. There were dimensional rifts that leaked things from other realities, things that should not exist in this universe. There were biological plagues sealed in ancient facilities waiting to be released. There were stellar engines built by extinct civilizations, designed to destroy entire star systems. The list went on and on. Each entry included detailed information about human operations against these threats. The reports read like military campaigns: battle casualties, resource expenditures, strategic objectives, tactical failures and successes. Humanity had been fighting a 47-front war for 2 centuries, without anyone knowing, without anyone helping, without anyone even believing the threats existed. Vexnara felt physically ill as she read through the reports. In one entry, a human naval squadron had fought a 3-day battle against creatures that fed on starship crews. The squadron lost 6 ships. 2,000 humans died. The surviving commander recommended better weapons and more ships for that sector. The recommendation was implemented. The battle was never mentioned to the Council. It was just another day's work for humanity. Another entry detailed human operations on a world called Threshold. For 50 years, a rotating garrison of 10,000 human soldiers had been stationed there. Their job was to prevent something from emerging from deep underground. The reports did not explain what that something was, just that it must never be allowed to reach the surface. In those 50 years, the garrison had fought countless battles in underground tunnels. 7,000 humans had died on Threshold. The Council had never known that world existed. The revelation about human exploration ships hit particularly hard. Those ships that the Council had thought were peaceful science vessels. The ones that went to strange places and studied unusual phenomena, they were not science vessels. They were dreadnoughts, warships designed to engage the most dangerous threats in the galaxy. Each one carried enough firepower to level a planet. Each one had a crew trained for combat in conditions that would kill anyone else. The scientific outposts were fortress worlds, heavily armed installations designed to serve as staging areas for military operations. The asteroid mining operations were weapons factories, producing ammunition and equipment for the endless war. The tourist ships were transport vessels, moving troops and supplies to distant battlefields. Everything humanity did in space had a military purpose, because everything in space required military protection. Even the human diplomats had not been what they seemed. Ambassador Chen and his colleagues were not just diplomats. They were intelligence officers. Part of their job was representing humanity in the Council, but their real job was monitoring galactic threats and coordinating human defensive operations. Every human presence in Council space had been part of an elaborate security network. The files included personal logs from human soldiers and officers. Reading them was heartbreaking. A young human pilot wrote about losing her best friend in a battle against things she could not even describe properly. She wrote that she knew no one would ever know what they did here, that their sacrifice would never be recognized. But she wrote that it was okay, because somewhere out there families were safe. Children were growing up. People were living peaceful lives. That was enough. That made it worth it. A human general wrote about the frustration of trying to warn the Council about dangers they refused to see. He described presenting evidence of the Kresh swarm to a Council committee. The committee had dismissed his report as human paranoia. They said humans saw threats everywhere, because human psychology was shaped by their violent evolutionary history. The general wrote that after that meeting, humanity stopped trying to warn people. They just quietly did what needed to be done. Perhaps the most damning evidence was a series of requests for assistance. Over the decades, humans had formally asked for help many times. They had requested military support for dangerous sectors. They had asked for resources to build better defenses. They had invited other species to join them in studying ancient threats. Every request had been denied or ignored. The Council had always had reasons. Resources were needed elsewhere. The threats were not proven. Humans were being overly cautious. Now the Council understood. Humans had not been overly cautious. They had been desperately trying to prepare for threats that other species refused to believe existed. When no one would help, humans had done it themselves. They had shouldered the entire burden of galactic security. They had paid for it in blood and treasure. And when they finally grew tired of being the unpaid, unappreciated guardians of a galaxy that called them paranoid warmongers, they left. The philosophical differences that Ambassador Chen had mentioned were simple. Humans believed the galaxy was dangerous and required constant vigilance. Other species believed the galaxy was safe and peaceful. Humans had proven their belief by protecting everyone for 2 centuries. Now that they were gone, other species were learning the hard way that humans had been right. The council called an emergency session. Every member species was represented. The chamber was full but silent. Everyone had read the reports. Everyone knew the truth now. The question was what to do about it. Some suggested begging humanity to return. Others said humanity had abandoned them and could not be trusted. Still others argued that the galaxy needed to learn to defend itself. Vexnara stood to speak. She was old now, and she felt every year of her age. She told the council that they had failed humanity. She told them that humans had asked for help and been rejected. That humans had warned them and been ignored. That humans had sacrificed everything to protect them and been called paranoid. She said they had no right to ask humanity to come back. But she said they had to try anyway, because without humanity the galaxy would fall. The vote was unanimous. The council would send a delegation to Earth. They would apologize. They would ask for help. They would offer anything humanity wanted. Resources, territory, recognition, anything. The delegation prepared to depart immediately. Messages were sent ahead, requesting an audience with human leadership. For 3 days there was no response from Sol system. Finally a reply came. It was brief and formal. Earth acknowledged receipt of the council's request for a meeting. However, humanity was not interested in rejoining the council. Humanity was not interested in resuming its role as galactic protector. Humanity was done. The message suggested that the council should focus on learning to protect itself. Then the communication channel closed. Humanity was not answering any more calls. The delegation was still sent, but everyone knew it was hopeless. Humanity had made its choice. The galaxy would have to face its nightmares alone, and those nightmares were just beginning. 1 year after humanity's departure, the galaxy was burning. The Kresh swarm had consumed 3 entire sectors. 12 species were extinct. Billions were dead, and the Kresh were still advancing. They were not the only threat. Across the galaxy, every danger that humanity had been suppressing was now active. Ancient machines were awakening. Dimensional rifts were expanding. Plagues were spreading. The galaxy was learning what it meant to live without protection. The council delegation had reached Sol system. They approached slowly, broadcasting peaceful intentions and requests for dialogue. What they saw made them stop in fear. The entire solar system was fortified like nothing they had ever seen. Thousands of weapons platforms orbited every planet. Energy shields covered every settlement. Military stations larger than most council cities floated in formation around Earth. Sol system was not just defended. It was a fortress. The delegation was allowed to approach Earth, but only after being scanned multiple times by weapons that could have destroyed their ship instantly. They were given a strict flight path to follow. Any deviation would result in immediate destruction. The message was clear. Humans had tolerated council visitors before. Now visitors were only accepted under human terms. One wrong move and the conversation would end permanently. They were brought to Luna Base, a military facility on Earth's moon. The delegation was met by Admiral Sarah Chen, daughter of the former ambassador. She was younger than her father, but her eyes had the same tired look. She greeted them formally and led them to a conference room. The room had large windows that showed Earth hanging in space, beautiful and peaceful. Outside the windows, weapons platforms drifted past. The contrast was deliberate. Vexnara spoke for the delegation. She apologized. She explained everything the council had learned. She admitted that humans had been right about everything. She begged for humanity to reconsider and return to help the galaxy. She offered everything the council could give. Technology, resources, territory, recognition, anything humanity wanted. She spoke for an hour, her voice breaking several times. When she finished, there was silence. Admiral Chen looked at them for a long moment. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm but cold. She thanked them for coming so far. She acknowledged their apology. Then she said no. Humanity would not return. The council wanted to know why. The Admiral smiled, but there was no warmth in it. She said she would show them why. She brought up a holographic display. It showed human casualty reports from the past 2 centuries. The numbers were staggering. Over the course of 200 years, 12 million humans had died fighting to protect the galaxy. 12 million soldiers, scientists, colonists, and crew members. Some died in battle. Some died in accidents on dangerous missions. Some died slowly from exposure to things that should not exist. The list went on and on, page after page of names and dates and causes of death. The Admiral pointed out specific entries. A research team that died studying an ancient bioweapon so they could learn how to neutralize it. A naval squadron that sacrificed themselves to buy time for evacuation ships to escape a crash attack. A garrison that held a position for 6 months against impossible odds to prevent something terrible from escaping. Every entry was a story of sacrifice. Every name was someone who had died protecting people who did not even know they needed protecting. She showed them the cost in resources. The human economy had been on a war footing for 200 years. Every human colony contributed a portion of its production to military needs. Human citizens paid higher taxes to fund the defense of the galaxy. Human corporations built weapons and ships and supplies instead of luxury goods. Humanity had been living like a civilization at war because they were at war. While everyone else enjoyed peace and prosperity, humans had been sacrificing their own well-being for the common good. Then she showed them the requests for help that had been denied. Dozens of formal requests over the decades, each one politely asking for assistance, each one explaining why it was needed. Each one rejected. The Admiral read some of the Council's responses aloud. They claimed humans were exaggerating threats. They said humans were militaristic and seeing danger where none existed. They suggested humans focus on peaceful pursuits instead of preparing for wars that would never come. The Admiral's voice grew harder as she read. She asked the delegation a question. If someone asked for your help and you refused and you called them paranoid for asking, how many times should they ask before they stop? How much should they sacrifice for people who think they are crazy? How long should they protect people who insult them for it? The delegation had no answer. Admiral Chen continued. She explained that humanity had not abandoned the galaxy out of spite. They had left because they were exhausted. 200 years of fighting alone had taken its toll. Human society was strained. Military families had lost multiple generations to the endless war. The economy was suffering, and still no one believed them. No one helped. No one even thanked them. Eventually, human leadership made a decision. If the galaxy did not want protection, humanity would stop providing it. She said the decision had been controversial among humans. Many had argued they should keep fighting regardless of recognition, that protecting innocent lives was its own reward. But others had pointed out that humanity was not infinite. They had limits. They were spending their children's future to protect people who hated them for it. At some point, they had to prioritize their own survival. That argument won. Humanity withdrew. Vexenara asked what humanity would do now. The Admiral gestured at the windows at the fortified system beyond. She said humanity would survive. Sol system was sealed. Nothing got in without permission. Nothing got out without clearance. Humanity had brought all its people home. They had enough resources to be self-sufficient. They had technology centuries ahead of anyone else. They would be fine. And they would watch the galaxy burn, because that was what the galaxy had chosen. One of the delegates asked about the threats. Would humanity really let them spread unchecked? What if they eventually reached Sol system? The Admiral smiled grimly. She said humanity had been fighting 47 extinction-level threats. They had systems in place to monitor all of them. If any threat came toward Sol system, it would be destroyed long before it arrived. Humanity had the weapons, the experience, and the will to protect themselves. But only themselves. Everyone else was on their own. The delegation tried to negotiate. They offered more. They promised changes. They said the Council would acknowledge everything humanity had done. They would build monuments. They would teach their children about human sacrifice. The Admiral listened politely, then said no again. She said monuments were nice, but 12 million dead humans did not need monuments. They had needed help when they were alive. They had needed support. They had needed the galaxy to believe them. None of that had come. Monuments now were meaningless. She delivered humanity's final message. The galaxy had 200 years to learn that the universe was dangerous. It refused to learn. Now it would learn the hard way. Humanity wished the Council luck. They would need it. Earth would observe from safety and would not interfere. If the galaxy survived and grew stronger, perhaps in a few centuries there could be a new relationship. But not now. Not until the galaxy understood what survival really required. The delegation was escorted back to their ship. As they departed Sol system, they looked back at Earth one last time. The beautiful blue world floating in space, surrounded by weapons and shields. A fortress world that had once tried to protect everyone and now protected only itself. The delegation returned to the council with their report. The answer was no. Humanity was done saving those who would not save themselves. The galaxy descended into chaos. The Kresh swarm continued its advance. Ancient horrors awakened. Stable space routes collapsed. Species that had existed for millions of years found themselves fighting for survival. The council tried to coordinate a defense, but they had no experience with real war. Their military commanders made mistakes that cost millions of lives. Their weapons were inadequate. Their strategies were flawed. They were learning, but learning was expensive. Some species adapted quickly. They studied human tactics and implemented them. They built real militaries and trained real soldiers. They learned to fight and survive. These species started to hold back the threats. Slowly, painfully, they began to understand what humanity had been doing all along. They began to appreciate the burden humanity had carried. But appreciation came too late. Other species did not adapt. They clung to their old ways, insisting the threats would pass. These species died. Entire civilizations were erased from the galaxy. Their worlds went silent. Their history became nothing but ruins. The galaxy was learning the hardest lesson of all. Peace is not the natural state of the universe. Peace is maintained by those willing to fight for it. Humanity had fought for 2 centuries. Now the galaxy was learning to fight for itself. Those who learned would survive. Those who did not would be forgotten. And in Sol System, humanity watched in silence, remembering all the times they had warned everyone, remembering all the times they had begged for help, and remembering that the galaxy had called them paranoid warmongers right up until the moment they learned humanity had been right all along.